Dung, dung. I don't want to be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I don't want to be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I'm tired of looking around rooms wondering what I gotta do or who I'm supposed to be. I don't wanna be anything other than me.
Season 9, the final chapter. Episode 175 out of 187. Alright, campers, it's time to end this shit. Evil dies tonight! We open up on a shot of a building burning with Dan and Chris Keller plotting to murder someone. Also, Chris Keller is back for some reason. Chase has been arrested, Clay is losing his mind and yelling at Dwin Quames, telling her to get out. Brooke trashes Karen's cafe. Jaylee Hames Scott visits the morgue to presumably identify Natan's body, and someone beats the shit out of Julian. And what the hell is going on here? Anyways, we're back to reality and all is well. Just kidding. Brooke and Julian are dealing with the reality of being new parents and all the lack of sleep that implies. Jaylee Hames Scott gets a call from Natan, who's out traveling in Europe for some reason. Clay is passed out on a merry-go-round out in a public park for some reason, and oh hey, is that building on fire? And Dan definitely set it alight. Also, Natan just quoted The Tempest at me, and now I have to relive the pain of Before the Storm, because hell, indeed, is empty, and all the devils are here. Anyhows, the front door to the cafe is wide open when Jaylee Hames Scott shows up in the morning. Chase and Alex are living together. He's got some kind of shipment coming in at Trick he's got to take care of, and god damn it, I hate it here. This really is the worst timeline. Anyhows, Clay sleepwalks, and apparently he does this a lot. This is absurd. These writers are stupid. Only stupid people would write shit like this. Anyways, I'm here to announce that I'm starting to write my noon teen drop. My legal team has advised me not to make promises I can't keep. I really gotta stop making these jokes. Anyways, guess who's back in town to run Red Bedroom Records? It's that sick fuck Chris Keller. Jaylee Hames Scott shuts his shit down, and oh hey, he hasn't changed a bit. God damn it. Also, oh hey, bitch Toria is here to visit her grandkids and she completely ignores her daughter. Also, apparently Brooke, a notorious party girl, is religious now? Anyways, we can finally meet Brooke's dad later on. Chris Keller is still a jackass who's living in the past, stuck in it, and how could someone execute him on the spot right now? Also, he's still doing some casual sexual harassment. Nothing ever changes, and I'm in hell. In an effort to stay up all night to make sure Clay doesn't sleepwalk again, Dwin plays some Angry Birds. And also, Jaylee can't stop finding doors open that shouldn't be. It's just like Scream, 1996. Surely this isn't a setup. Natan's gotta get home tomorrow, so that's nice. Also, someone definitely just tried to break into their house. Back in reality, the babies, Jude and Davis, like to drive. So Brooke just drives them around so they'll sleep. What a weird phenomenon. We see Brooke taking a trip down memory lane as she drives around Tree Hill for hours. She comes home and Julian is none the wiser. Clay goes to the doctor to get his sleepwalking shit checked out. They run some neurological tests on him and prescribe him something like Hypnosil, so he'll stop having to run from Freddy or something, I don't know. Anyways, Brooke is getting her boys christened, and for the first time ever, we see Brooke's dad. He's played by Richard Burgi, who was in such hit films as Hostel 2 and The Green Inferno, so he's an Eli Roth kind of guy, which says everything you need to know. He also was in some of the show The Young and the Restless, which I had never heard of, and upon researching, I could never cover it because it has 12,549 episodes. How? I mean, I know how. It's because the show's been running for like fucking 70 years, but that's unhinged. How do you get that many episodes? Anyways, Alex complains about Chris Keller to Chase, then he's ready to throw hands, completely justifiably. Anyways, the awkward church visits gets weirder because Dan is back in town. He's here to talk to Natan, but he's here to tell Jaylee Hames Scott that he's homeless due to a diner fire, and he'd like to live with them for a few days. He guilt trips his way into their house, and we cut back to Chris Keller being a shitlord asshole, and goddamn, I just want to punch him in the head. I'd love if this show just executed him on the spot. Also, he did turn Alex's song into a country song, which I have to note, because that's a little weird, champ. Jamie finally sees Dan, and we also see that Jamie's wearing a Keith Scott Body Shop hoodie, just like Lubisky. Jesus wept. More tedious bullshit ensues. Julian lost a job thing, and he's got some shit to worry about with loans and stuff. Surely this won't end horribly at all for anyone involved. Apparently, Chris is gonna be a recurring character, and I'm in pain, but there's not much left to the show, so we're sprinting to the finish like a madman. Also, Clay is still on a weird sleepwalking escapade, and Julian has an empty sound stage to deal with. Also, Nathan is home. He then discovers Dan is in his house and freaks the hell out. Episode 176 out of 187. Here I realized we won't get any more intros, and now I'm sad. This is tragic. Anyhows, Brooke wakes up and realizes the twins are being quiet. Her and Julian wake up and freak out, then discover that Bitchtoria is being a grandma. Brooke then goes to have a meeting with her dad since Bitchtoria rejected her new male baby clothes line. Anyhows, Nathan and Jaylee Hames Scott talk about Dan being in their house, and Nathan kicks him out immediately. Then we're off to Chase, who wakes up in an empty bed. This is because Alex is in the studio, which means more Chris Keller. God damn it. Apparently Chris Keller made the toaster pastry song that Dwin Quames was singing in that one episode in season 8. The more you know. Back to Mouth and Millie, he's put on a lot of weight for some reason, which means he's wearing a fat suit, and it's very distracting. Clay and Dwin are in the hospital for some reason, and it probably has to do with his sleepwalking adventures that they're likely never going to explain. Jamie sees his dad for the first time in a while, but he seems more concerned about Grandpa Dan. He's apparently over the fact that Dan killed Keith and doesn't understand why his mom and dad vehemently hate this abusive asshole grandpa. Anyhows, Clay's escapades ramp up, and when he thinks his doctor just told him he's crazy, she just told him to go see a psychiatrist. His therapy experiences aren't particularly good, so he just doesn't care and is gonna live with it. Dwin is very concerned, but he's very casual about it. Chase is gonna try to get Alex to move in with him, but first he's gotta mess with Chris Keller, which is why he brought Chuck. Chuck is gonna punch him in the balls or something, but he's the decoy for Chase to do whatever. It fails horribly. Anyways, Brooke has breakfast lunch with her dad, and he's gonna help her start this high-end baby clothes line. Clay is comforted by Nathan and Jamie telling him to get help, but now Nathan has to go back to Europe for a week or two, and it's not great. Dan is getting kicked out again, and all is well. Jamie talks to his dad about why he's kicking out Grandpa and tries to guilt trip him over it or something. Dan and Jaylee talk, and she just rips into him, but tells him he's got an opportunity to prove he's grown. Brooke and Victoria bicker and fight over her dad, and man, it's a bit too late to be introducing Brooke making her business as some delusional notion that it'll unite her broken family. Victoria leaves and Brooke is sad. Boom wah. Back in the studio, Alex and Chris Keller do some things, and the writers try to humanize this comedic villain. Alex visits Julian for advice on whether or not she should tour for her new album, and it's strange. Almost as strange as the mouth subplot about him being fat. Chris Keller visits Jaylee Hames Scott, who neglected to tell Nathan that he's back in town. Jaylee slams the door on him, and Nathan is a bit pissy that she didn't tell him about the dickwad being back in town. Anyhows, Chase moved all Alex's stuff into his apartment without telling her, and thank Christ she was receptive, because this could have ended horribly. However, for Chase, it ends in Funky Town shenanigans and reaffirming their love for each other. kinda just kidding. She seems pretty sad about it when he's not there. So she goes and sees Chris and says she'll take the tour spot. Clay decides to not go pick up his meds, and that seems strange, but I'm not in the business of questioning things I don't understand. Episode ends with Dan and Nathan saying Dan has until he gets back to get the hell out of here. Something says he's up to no good. Episode 177 out of 187. Chase wakes up in his empty apartment and starts breaking shit. Clay is doing well now, and all is great for him. Jaylee Hames, however, ain't doing well since a rival cafe just opened directly across the street. What a strange thing to introduce in the final season. Anyhows, more familial drama with Brooke, but it is what it is, I suppose. Chase visits the cafe and he's destroying himself since Alex has been gone. Also, Chuck is talking like Chris Keller. Speaking of CK, he's running a weird intern scam thing, and oh boy, I imagine that this won't lead anything plot relevant, I hope. Anyhows, Crispy throwing himself at any women available or taken. Cafe problems, Mouth and Millie are fighting, and oh hey, Dan is working at the cafe now because reasons, and nothing bad can happen, Will, right? What? Am I?
Oh, Dios mío. Am I having an aneurysm? Can someone save me from myself?
Whatever. Julian is having a crisis, but he manages to get an interested buyer for renting out his soundstage. Chris and Chase talk and then go to the stripped club and drink and shit. Clay goes on some weird and wacky, apparently drug-purchasing adventure, and Jwin Quames is following him like she's playing Tree Hill Noir. Diner shit happens, Jaylee decides to stand up for Dan, Julian preps for the studio visit, and more. Brooke hashes some shit out with her dad, and she gets some of that paternal validation or whatever she wants. Anyhows, apparently Clay's got the Tree Hill drug addiction, TM, which is a source of division between Clay and Jwin Quames. Mouth and Millie talk about his weight problem, and it doesn't seem to go well. Chase and Chris seem to be getting along well, though. Clay deletes some evidence, Mouth has a very sad and lonely dinner, Jwin Quames is lost and lonely, but Clay has something to say. He's got an opioid addiction due to the gunshot incident, which isn't what I expected to see. Dan loses his one-shift cafe job because, it's Karen's cafe. Then Julian gets a call from Brooke and realizes that he never dropped off the twin he was with at daycare. He sees the police searching his car, and the baby gets taken to the hospital. Woo! Me too, baby. I'm feeling like a baby in a hot car. I'm gonna die in here. It's one of those days. Episode 178 out of 187. All right, campers. We open with a certified Tree Hill Hospital scene where Julian gets ignored by his wife. Then Jwin enters the house
like carpet,
and Clay is nowhere to be found. He's out buying opioids and running away. Also, the cafe across the street is engaging in a casual smear campaign against Karen's cafe, and it's goofy as all hell. However, even goofier is Jwin deciding it's a good idea to try and confront a drug dealer. Thankfully, Clay is able to save her, but after the encounter, it ends with him getting pissed at her for interfering with his drug thing. The babies are home and safe, but Brooke won't forgive Julian or let him do anything after the hot car incident. Then we're back to Clay and Jwin fighting in their house, and she's blaming him for his drug problem. He kicks her out of the house
like rocket fuel.
And suddenly the thing from episode 175 makes sense. Anyhows, Chase had a one-night stand / repeated nightstands with some random lady, and it's kinda goofy. Who cares though, Skills is back, and now he's gotta get in on the whole fat mouth thing. Then Jwin goes to see Jaylee Hames Scott and explain what happened last night, and I'm starting to sense something bad happening when Dan overhears this conversation, just like he overhears everything. Also, back at Brooke and Julian's house, Julian is completely alone since Brooke left and took the kids, which means it's not unreasonable to assume that given the present situation,
it looks like divorce is back on the menu, boys!
Anyhows, things ensue and none of it matters except for Nathan coming home tonight, which means Dan's gotta get his ass out of here. But first, Dan's got a drug dealer to go fight. I see no way this could end badly since he threatens the shit out of him instead of leaving the problem alone and not endangering his, I'm gonna say this with 17 air quotes, family. Julian goes to look at his messed up car and he's sad. We're back to the mouth as a fat bastard subplot, and it immediately gets interrupted by the Karen's Cafe fighting against the rival cafe subplot. Also, it turns out that the girl Chase has been sleeping with was Chris Keller's girlfriend. Wow, what a twist. No, seriously, I didn't really see that coming. Julian picks up his car and he's destroying his mind, just like he's destroying his marriage. We get a certified recreation moment when Clay is walking down by the beach and he gets assaulted by Dan again. Dan gives him the old baptism by ocean drowning treatment, only for Clay to reveal that he has no memory of how he got into that situation, and apparently he's sleep buying drugs. Gwyn witnesses this, and they talk about how he doesn't know anything, and I'm starting to think the writers saw Fight Club and asked, what if it was stupid? And they never looked back. Checking back on Julian, he hasn't seen his family at all, and he's scared. He talks to Jaylee Haim Scott, and they talk about the time Jamie almost drowned and those feelings, and we know they're gonna work things out, because of course they will. Julian's got a newfound confidence, and he's ready to make things right, or something. Anyhow's, Mouth's subplot is reaching a conclusion, and he's gonna start to lose that weight that he magically gained between seasons 8 and 9. Clay goes and sees his psychiatrist, and we discover he probably needs to admit himself to a mental hospital in order to get his problems solved. Jaylee then gives the same parenting speech to Broke, and they're gonna fix the damage. Chris Keller's girlfriend owns the rival cafe, and she's a bitch. Moving on, at Trick, the boys talk about their problems, and Chase feels even worse for what he did. Nathan's coming home tonight, and Jamie questions why Dan has to go. Then, Chase tries to dump CK girlfriend, but she and him have sex instead. Why is this show going here? I thought we did this, but with two girls fighting over the same guy back in season 1 and seasons 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I guess nothing has changed. Nothing ever changes. Julian is trying to atone for his sins, but he sure can't forgive himself. However, Brooke forgives him and all is well, or something. Anyhows, Nathan didn't come home and there wasn't a phone call. What a strange thing. Episode 179 out of 187. Jaylee keeps calling Nathan and he's not responding at all, and it's starting to get concerning. Julian is still shaken up about what happened, and it's not like it's an easy thing to get over, which is why Brooke asks him to drop the kids off at the babysitter's since she needs to cover at the cafe for Jaylee Haim Scott. Chase and woman, her name is Tara, get woken up by that shithead little dickwad cuck Chuck, who apparently has keys to Chase's apartment. His dad's coming home today, so he's abandoning his, not actual, big bro. Clay has the Fight Club disorder due to some repressed trauma, and now they've gotta figure that out. Jaylee Haim Scott talks to Gwyn Quames about Nate not being home, and then she's gotta go take care of the kids. We then cut to Nathan's phone ringing in a warehouse and getting destroyed, before we cut to Chase and Chuck visiting Chris Keller, and they see Tara and him making out, which causes Chase to have a panic and get Chuck out of here. Except Chuck is a bit stupid and thinks that Tara left Chase for Chris, not the other way around. Then Chase explains it, and Chuck, being the cuck he is, leaves and looks down upon him. Anyways, Julian's back at the hospital again with a kid in there for some reason. It's because he's being paranoid and there's nothing wrong with the babies, but something is wrong with him. Jamie thinks Clay is a werewolf and he doesn't know that Clay's in a mental hospital. Millie teaches Brooke how to use the espresso machine, and then more shit ensues because Karen's Cafe has roaches because of the plant that Tara brought over yesterday. She sucks in every capacity, and Chase can see this now, so he shuts this shit down. Brooke comes over, and she's ready to throw down with everyone. Jaylee Haim Scott and Chris Keller go to the cops to get a missing persons report filed, and when the cop doesn't believe her, Chris does his thing and gets the cop to do something about it. Clay talks to this little kid at the mental hospital, and it seems like he's gonna help this kid and then learn that he's ready to help himself. Julian is still on he bullshit, Chase and Chris continue to dance around the issue, and Jaylee Haim Scott's crusade to find her husband, which means he's definitely been kidnapped. It figures that his first big arc involved kidnapping, then his last arc involves getting kidnapped. Anyhow, Chase and Chuck work out some damages and all is well. Julian gets a random note of harassment and he loses his mind. Clay is convinced he doesn't need to get help for his troubles, but Gwyn convinces him to stay anyway. Chuck's dad comes to town and it's awfully convenient. Also convenient is that Dan has some unmarked stacks of cash, along with some weird personal items, which Jaylee Haim Scott discovers. Also, I called it when I said Clay is gonna help that kid, because he does. Back with Brooke, that harassment note is from Tara. Who would have thought? Julian gets into a random drunken bar fight, Brooke trashes Tara's diner, and things are crashing down. Dan burnt the diner down, and he explains that he committed arson in a desperate attempt to get close to his family, and he didn't know his son was missing. Now it's probably time for a Dan Scott redemption arc. Except Jaylee Haim Scott calls the cops on Dan. Oh boy! Anyhow, episode end. Episode 180 out of 187. It's Mouth's news segment, and they talk about the trashing of the Terra Cafe. Julian comes home after his big bar fight. Brooke and Julian are fighting again, and man, all I can think of is this house going up in flames, a la Tallahassee. We see Dan in the station, and he shit talks the cops because he didn't do anything wrong. Anyhow, guess what hit the news? Natan's missing person report. Oh boy! Anyhow, after Jaylee tries to convince Jamie it'll all be okay, we cut to Natan in a warehouse with this top dollar looking ass Russian mobster who has kidnapped him and can't stop laughing about it. Chase and Tara keep boning and all that shit. And guess who conveniently was in the neighborhood? That's right, Chris Keller. At the mental hospital, Clay and Child, I don't have his name yet, so we're just gonna call him Child, talk about the X-Men comics, and then the kid launches into how Clay needs to open up to his doctor to get help. Back at the warehouse, Top Dollar, T-Bird, Funbag, and the boys are here to make Natan Draven pay because he's a sports agent who tried to sign the wrong person. He's been kidnapped because of basketball. What good writing. Such realism. Anyhow, Dan gets kicked out and his family hates him, but he's got a place at Julian's soundstage. Brooke goes to apologize to Jaylee for what happened at the cafe, but then learns Natan's missing and she's got to manage the cafe's shit so Jaylee can focus on Natan. Anyhow, it turns out that Clay's a very traumatized boy from watching his wife die in front of him, getting shot at point blank after discovering your girlfriend got shot, so he's got a lot to unpack. At the warehouse, we get some awkward jokes and Natan trying to negotiate his way out of this mess, and it ain't going so well. He's gonna get executed by the Russian mob, because of course he is. Mouth visits Clay and breaks the news to him that Natan's missing, which makes Clay lose his mind because he got a voicemail that said he, Natan, was gonna go off the beaten path looking for players in Eastern Europe. Oh boy! Julian and Dan talk, and seems like they're gonna work together to find Natan, vigilante style. Dan thinks Natan got kidnapped over some weird back alley prison deals he made, and Julian is gonna help him. Clay leaves the mental hospital and the kid, because something people always leave. Brooke accidentally tells Chris Keller that Tara and Chase have been boning, and this gets some interesting tension building. Clay enters a fugue state and shit hits the fan because he's a danger to himself. Anyhow, Chris performs at Karen's cafe, and it's all because Brooke accidentally broke the news to CK. This revives the cafe and does a lot of good for the fracturing reputation. Tara drops by, and Chris stops the show briefly to kick Chase, and they go to the club to get drunk, and so Chris can get girls, I guess. Dan and Julian start to go down the list of Dan's many enemies. The mob men talk and shit is hitting the fan pretty rapidly, but Natan manages to negotiate his situation from mob gets the call, he gets executed, to the mob is gonna ransom me. Brooke has won the cafe war with some calculated mistakes. Clay talks to Child and they're still friends. Dan and Julian are working pretty well together, but Dan tells Julian to go be with his family while he can. Dan's redemption arc is starting off pretty well, I'd say, especially when Julian says, "We'll find him," implying they are a team. Mouth visits Dan, and he's got info to help find Nathan. A list of Central/Eastern European basketball criminals. I'm sorry, what the fuck is that sentence past me? That's part of the show. That's real. That happens. But what the fuck is this plot line? Help! But Nathan's problem is now that the mob is gonna sell him to the mob and he's gonna die regardless. Oopsie. Anyhows, Lydia is walking now and Jaylee experiences severe emotional whiplash.
Episode 191 out of 187.
We open with Shakespeare stated in a Russian accent and Nathan being taunted by the mob. They force him to drink water and Nathan is not afraid since he's got that dog in him. He, in all honesty, is strong enough to break the zip ties behind... Man, fuck it, we'll do it live! He, in all honesty, is strong enough to break the zip ties binding his wrists, but apparently he can't. Jamie is beginning to doubt if his dad's ever gonna come home when a cop comes to the door. The kind of douchey cop from before is here to try and get some help, and Jaylee Hames hands off the a stuffed animal Nathan brought back from Europe to the cop. We then cut to Dan playing NCIS and trying to piece everything together. Brooke gets a letter from the state, and apparently the dude who murdered Quentin way back in season 6 is up for parole. And since Brooke was the one that got him arrested, she finds out pretty quickly since he wants to meet her before his hearing. She's honestly way too forgiving and wants to see if he's capable of changing, but I highly doubt he's changed. Anyhows, Clay is talking to his psychiatrist about his life, and he mentions comics, and his favorite heroes are Batman and Wolverine, which means I have to bring up the fact that Invincible was running strong and easily outclasses everything he mentioned at this point. Not the point. I really like Invincible. It's a really good comic. It's one of my favorites. Not the point. We start to get to the root of Clay's problems, but then it's airport time, and who's making his triumphant return to Tree Hill? That's right, the original hero, the one, the only motherfucking Lubisky Scott! And god damn does his hair suck. But he's here now to be a hero. He and Jaylee Hames Scott hug, and this is a huge moment for the show. They, of course, ask about Peyton Scott and Sawyer Scott, and they're doing well in their off-screen adventures. They're going off to get food, and I can't believe the boy is back in town. It's here. We just need a coach cameo, and it's perfect. We've won. It's over. Back to Chase. He had another one-night stand, but apparently it was a threesome with a girl and Chris Keller. Also, Chase just got called back into the Air Force, and apparently it was a foursome when another girl pops up. What a strange scene. Anyhows, Brooke apparently hasn't gotten the news that Lucas is back in town, so she's still coping with the murder parole thing. Back with the mobsters, there's a reference to Gossip Girl, and oh hey, that drug dealer that nearly shot Clay and Jwin Quames. Back with Clay, we start to get some breakthroughs, and it's something to deal with not having a family and his former dead wife. We're back in the airport with Lucas and Jaylee talking about Nathan's disappearing, and it's a weirdly emotionally charged cutaway scene. Back in the office, getting more Clay lore, and we make big progress about him running away, being an invisible man, and once he'd driven far enough, he was gonna kill himself. Then he saw a big-ass beach house with Force Ghost Sarah at the end of the road. He rented it, and the rest is when we met him in season whatever. And essentially meeting Nathan saved his life. Apparently, the reason Lubisky came back is for Jaylee Hames Scott to send Jamie and Lydia to go live with him until they find Dad. This is all something weird, but hey, the ride is almost over. Back in the Mobland warehouse, Nathan gets taunted and called a cash cow. He should be afraid or something, but I don't know. Jamie wants the last video his dad sent him, but he left his iPod at home, which means he has Julian send him an email with the file. Julian then has an idea. He gives a flash drive with the video on it to Dan instead of the police. Blah blah therapy things, then back to mob stuff. He saw Nathan play one time and talks about how he lost, and when Nathan asks for some water, he bursts through the restraints and begins to go for the chokehold kill. Nathan teaches him the takedown and he's on an escape mission. He gets his first kill, cuts himself loose, and begins his escape. Brooke goes and talks to the guy, a former murder man, and we transition to her at the hearing saying that she thinks he should still remain in prison for his actions since he hasn't changed changed and never will. What a weird one-episode plotline. Anyhow, it's time for Lucas to take his niece and nephew back to, well, wherever it is he and his wife live. And we get an extended goodbye sequence, and now they head home. Time for Jaylee Hames Scott and Dwin Quames to head home. Back to Dan, he makes a breakthrough after the quick crying break. He's just like me. Anyways, Nathan is in this RCPD-ass building, and for some reason the cop from earlier is here, and the guy he choked out is alive, and the cop just hits him with a lead pipe. What the hell is going on here? Anyhow, Nathan's escape plan has just been cut short, and that sucks. Julian and Dan discover a symbol in the video, and it's one that Dan recognizes, and it's a bad thing. And to make things worse, the guy who murked Quentin is out of jail, and hunting broke down. And now Nathan is even more doomed because once the kidnappers get more money, he's gonna get shot and die, which is how we end the episode.
Dung, dung. I don't wanna be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I don't wanna be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I'm tired of looking around rooms wondering what I gotta do or who I'm supposed to be. I don't wanna be anything other than me.
Season 9.5, The End of Trevangelion. Episode 182 out of 187. This is it. We're halfway there. Only 5 more episodes to cover, and then we're off to the analysis. Let's fucking go! Moving on, Dan finds and follows a balding white guy and beats the shit out of him for no real reason, other than being a supposed lead. It was all an excuse for Dan to go back to prison and get some insider information. Weird methods, but okay, since he's making the mother of all omelets here, Jack, and he can't fret over every egg. Now that murder guy is on parole, he needs a job and applies for one at Karen's Cafe. Broke tells him to fuck off! And then we're cutting back to Clay and Little Guy flying model planes, and it's nice to see. My hack fraud writing senses are telling me that when Clay gets out of here, he's gonna adopt Little Guy. Just a hunch though. Today's the day that Chase leaves to go back to the Air Force, and he's hanging out with Chris Keller. They talk about Chase's biggest concern being Chuck, because Chuck is definitely being beaten by his dad. At home, Jaylee gets a call from La Policia, and it's because they might have found Nathan's body, and she's gotta go identify it. The little guy tells Clay that if he wants to get out of here, he's gotta answer the psychiatrist's questions honestly. Anyways, Chuck's dad is absolutely beating his son, so Chase is gonna take some actions if he figures out that the bruises he saw on Chuck were caused by his dad. He's gonna get the police involved. Jaylee and Dwin head to the coroner's office, and it's time to identify the body. She pulls the sheet, and she asks them to cover the body while crying furiously. They come home, and guess who's on the couch? That's right, the lady who had sex with a clown at Jamie's birthday party, Aunt Deb! Man, everyone's coming back, aren't they? And hey, the body wasn't Nathan's, so we've got some good news at least. In prison, we're back to Dan, and he's talking to a Russian mafia boy, and they were prison friends. They talk about Dan's conditions in exchange for what he did to that old guy he beat. We cut to Clay, and he finally opens up to the doctor, but we cut to Murder Guy continuing to torment Brooke at Karen's Cafe. Oh boy, I see no way he'll possibly come back after this incident. It's totally not like he's gonna try and kill Broke, Julian, and the kids, right? We see Jaylee and Deb talking things out, then we cut to Dan who's doing Dan things. Then, the guy who tells him about a guy named Dimitri, who coincidentally we saw at the warehouse earlier, and we know that Dan knows because he threatened him. Well, he knows the drug dealer that was talking to Dimitri was. Speaking of people coming back, David is here to help support his ex-wife and family. Dwin and David talk, then we come back to Clay. We get more Clay lore, and we're on the verge of finally understanding what went wrong. As Chase reads some military laws to figure out what'll happen if he beats the shit out of Chuck's dad, but he doesn't, and Chris Keller makes a promise to protect Chunk. Brooke makes Jaylee aware of Julian and Dan's crime-fighting adventure, and then, speaking of, Deb visits her ex-husband. He's gonna get Nathan back come hell or high water. Back to Clay, he finally makes his big breakthrough around how much watching his dead wife screwed him up inside and all that internalized self-loathing, which really makes me want to talk about the Crow again, because it's a whole story all about that grief, self-blaming, and self-loathing, but then he can't talk anymore, so he leaves. Also, editor's note, this was written well before I wrote the Crow video. Go watch that video here. It's a pretty good one, honestly. I even talked about the remake that I didn't know was happening when I wrote this. It's a good one. Check it out. Okay. Anyway, back to the normal stuff. Dan and Julian find the guy, and Julian tells Danny Boy that they need a plan before they just barge in trying to get answers. Jaylee visits the police station, and oh boy, Trader Cop is there to throw everything off balance. Deb tells Jaylee that their only hope is Danny Boy, which is a horrifying thought to hear. Chase goes to see Chuck one last time, and wouldn't you know it, Chuck is being beaten by his dad. Chase grabs a tire iron, and it's time to recreate that scene from Drive 2011 as we hear a classic bonk sound effect. We cut to Brooke and Julian talking, but then they're being tormented by that guy again. Clay goes and has a memory session and sees a blurred memory in his usual memory montage. And upon looking at Little Guy, it starts to come into focus. They had a kid named Logan, and that little guy is Little Guy. Clay has made his big breakthrough. He's a bit pissy, and Clay isn't ready to be a dad. He's having a total crisis since no one just flat out told him he had a kid. Also, Chase gets arrested for him absolutely murdering Chuck's dad. Free my boy, he did nothing wrong. Clay goes home and talks to Dwin Quames about his repressed memories. Jaylee Hames Scott visits Danny Boy and joins the research and rescue project, and the episode ends. Episode 183 out of 187. Dan and Jaylee do the same recon mission he and Julian already did. Chuck denies that his dad beat him because his mom is standing right next to him, which means Chase is going to jail. Yippee! Anyhows, Dwin and Clay talk about his son he didn't know he had. He's taking this pretty hard, especially since Little Guy is his son and he didn't know. Anyhows, Julian and Brooke are at home dealing with the paranoia, but then it turns out to be a real fear since Murder Guy is trying to team up with Tara. Doesn't matter right now, Clay, with the help of Dwin, is gonna pick up Little Guy. Actually, I lied just a second ago because Tara and Murder Guy called every single plumber in town on Karen's Cafe. This war is back on again. Wahoo! Chris Keller bailed Chase out of jail, and the funny thing is, they didn't give Chase a new shirt, so he's got a blood-splattered shirt on. Tara is a bitch, Murder Guy is a bitch, everyone here is a bitch, and this is one messed up cafe drama. Skills and Mouth have an episode together, and it's exploring why Mouth got so overweight, but not how he put on this much weight this fast. Anyhow, Dan is armed again, and he and Jaylee Hames Scott are planning something big. Clay learns how he managed to forget his son, and then he learns that it was a traumatic response thing, and that's something, I guess. More standard things ensue. Brooke and Julian try to get Murder Guy's parole officer to get him to send him back to jail, but it doesn't work well. But what is going to work well is Jaylee and Dan's plan. She's gonna dress like a prostitute and lure the drug dealer off and have Dan do his thing. Chase is gonna get into a big ol' legal battle and probably lose his position in the Air Force. And Chris Keller, finally having a friend, is determined to help Chase not go to jail. Clay finally talks to his son and tells him about him being his son. It's a hard conversation to have, but we'll get there in good time. Chris Keller goes and visits Chuck and gets him to start following Chase's example and being a good person. Back to Jaylee Hames doing illegal things. She coerces a drug dealer into going into a more private location where Dan is gonna do his thing and beat the shit out of him. He does, and it's so awesome. Clay continues to spend time with the boy while Dwin and psychiatrists talk about his condition and how it's gotten a lot better. He'll just need some therapy. At Chase's Air Force trial, Chuck comes in to tell the truth that Chase did nothing wrong and to make sure he can keep his job. He tells him about how his father beat him and Chase saved him. Anyhows, Dan is going to commit some CIA-level torture and extract some information from this drug dealer, and it's time for Dan to save his son. Murder Guy confronts Brooke and tells her to leave him alone via direct threatening. Oh boy, I can't wait for the signature Tree Hill home invasion episode to come back. Clay and Lil Guy talk, and Clay reveals that he's his father, which goes about as well as you'd expect, which is to say terribly. Anyhows, Chase was discharged from the Air Force, but he won't go to prison, and it means he's gonna get to stay home now. So today wasn't a complete failure. Jaylee Hames Scott and Brooke chat about the day's events, Dan engages in some more CIA-level torture methods, and it's so great. Clay drives home with Jwin and looks terribly saddened, but it is what it is, I suppose. Julian and Brooke are asleep when, who could have guessed it, Murder Guy comes in and steals the kids. Wow, it wouldn't be the final season of One Tree Hill without some child kidnapping. Now would it? Episode 184 out of 187. Dan killed the drug dealer and only Julian and Dan know. Then Chris Keller comes and now 3 people know the drug guy is dead. Can't wait for Chris to join the cause. Anyways, how is Nathan doing? Oh, he's still being taunted by the mob boys. There's a kinda good joke about would you like 8x10 or wallet-sized when the mobster takes a pic of Nathan to send to his buyers. Nathan and his etiquette get him to not wear the blinding hood, so that's nice. Jaylee Hames Scott is running on a treadmill, then Brooke comes to the cafe and oh wow, it's completely trashed. Yippee! Anyways, the gang of Julian, Dan, and Chris Keller are gonna siege the warehouse. Dan is prepared to go full PMC and take them down Venom Snake style. Dan teaches them the rules and shit and makes a jab at CK, and then we're off to the other subplots. We're here with Clay, and he's taking a memory narration montage, and I'm pretty sure in the background we get another Ryan Adams song, so that means song number 23 on the Ryan Adams song counter. Woohoo! Anyhows, Dan is making a sawed-off shotgun while he teaches the boys how to shoot. They have until nightfall to prepare, and I'm getting excited for the siege. Back to Clay and Jwin. They're off driving around, talking about stuff. It's just a transitionary shot though. It's nightfall and the siege is beginning. Julian gets kicked off the team by Dan, who tells him to go since he's got a family and too much to lose. As Dan and Chris Keller prepare to exit the car and into the siege, Dan makes the worst pun ever about why Chris can't leave. It's, quote, "You can't, you called shotgun," while he hands him the sawed-off shotgun. And I won't lie, I chuckled. Yes, I am a very flawed person if you haven't gathered. But no time for the siege yet. We have to get a sad memory montage and Brooke doing her thing out of paranoia. Chris Keller and Dan are gonna get to it real soon, and it's time to siege. But first, Brooke is all alone in a dark building, and then the murder guy is looking through the window. Anyways, it's time for CK and Dan to be the heroes of the story. Just kidding. Brooke locks up and leaves Karen's cafe, and then the murder guy follows her. Clay and Jwin drove out to visit Sarah's grave. Then it's back to Brooke, who's in a psychological horror film in a parking garage when murder guy appears with a knife. He's really pissed and was absolutely biding his time like a psychotic dweeb, and he immediately starts making the sexual assault threats. And right when he's about to do that, she gouges his eyes. The siege of an undisclosed warehouse in North Carolina begins. Chris Keller pins a big guy to the wall with a car, and he gets the hell out of there. Time for Dan to start blasting like he's the Terminator. My man! Then the main mafia man shoots Nathan, only to find out it was the guy Dan tortured instead of Nathan in the chair. Dan and Nathan are reunited, and it's time for them to go. Check back in on Clay having one last dead wife vision, where he tells her everything that happened. It's a fairly touching scene, all things considered, and it matters because it gives Clay his final mission: reunite with his son and be a family. Jaylee Hames Scott watches some old press conference tapes of Nathan, and it's nice. But now it's time to get to the escort mission, Resident Evil 4 style. It's time for the grand escape, and whatever happens is whatever happens. Nathan finally says, "It's good to see you, Dad." and then we're back to Brooke's torture event. He's going to kill her, and then he gets tased by none other than Tara. Brooke takes the taser and holds it against him until he goes limp. Back to the escape plot, though. Nathan has got to get carried out because he's weak and malnourished. Dan takes a bullet to save Nathan, and it's because the main mafia man shot him in the back. As he monologues, Nathan whips out his secret handgun that Dan slipped him, and he kills the final mafia man. Fuck yeah! Bastard Cop finally comes in to try and end Nathan himself, but what's this? It's Julian with a steel pipe! By God! And now it's time to go home. Dan is still breathing? Clay and Jwin drive home, and he's determined to get his son back. Brooke and Tara have finally settled their feud, and hey, the rival cafe is going to close down. Back to Nathan, he's desperately trying to make sure his dad is alive. Julian calls someone, and it's Jaylee Hames Scott. Episode end. Episode 185 out of 187. Julian and Nathan stole a cop car to speed rush Dan to the hospital. Dan is still alive, and we gotta get a Dan regret montage as they bum rush over to the hospital. They signal the cops that they're heading over to the hospital, and Dan is still having his montage. Everyone rushes to the hospital, and Jaylee Hames and Nathan Scott have been reunited, and it's a very sweet moment to see the agony over. Now we gotta get Lubisky and the kids back here, and it'll be great. Clay hasn't gotten the news yet, so he visits Sarah's parents, and they tell him about what happened and all that jazz. Brooke reaches the hospital, and she and Julian talk about what happened in both of their nights. Anyhows, Jamie and Lydia are all back in Tree Hill, and Deb comes to visit Nathan. Nathan talks to his dad, and after a quick choke shot montage, Dan talks to Jamie. He tells him he probably isn't gonna get out of this one, boys. Then we cut to Clay and Nathan talking about what happened while they were apart. Jaylee Hames Scott talks to Jwin and Nathan. Brooke and her dad talk, and he's actually trying to be a good person. It's sweet. Then we get more Nathan and Jaylee and family shots. Now we're back to Julian and his soundstage, where he's got some inspiration to be a director again, but not a movie. He comes home and tells Brooke and her dad about how he's rereading Lubisky's book, An Unkindness of Ravens, and he thinks this book is too vast to be a movie. His solution? A TV show. And oh god damn it, they're really getting meta with it. They're doing this? Okay then. Brooke's dad actually has a bunch of memories of Brooke's childhood that she didn't even know he knew. She finally has the dad she always wanted, or something. Clay convinces Sarah's parents that he should be able to have his son back. Then we cut back to Brooke, and her dad's got some big offer for her. Then we're back to Nathan and Jamie, and he's got to explain to his son that Dan is going to die pretty soon. Jamie goes to tell his little sister. We then get a Dan almost dies montage before we're back to Dan when Jaylee Hames Scott and Lydia come to visit. She tells him that Lubisky isn't coming to visit him, and Dan apologizes for everything that he's done. You know, the whole last act of a dying man thing. Dan gets to hold his granddaughter for the first time, and he says goodbye for the last time. Jaylee has finally forgiven Danny Boy for all of his sins and crimes, and his redemption arc with everyone who can be redeemed with is complete. Clay visits his son, and he's here to make it up to him. They talk about his mom, and this is the start of him trying to get to know his son. They hug, and then we're back to Brooke and her dad's subplot. We get another, except we're not. We get another Dan montage, and it's time for Deb to visit him. They talk about everything and come to terms with, and forgive, each other. Then it's time for the big fish to come to terms with Dan. It's Nathan's time to come to terms with the help of his wife telling him that it's okay that he hated his terrible and abusive father, and while it won't make up for what he did, Nathan can get some closure and end things off on a better note than they started, or something like that. Brooke then decides that she doesn't want to sell her idea, and oopsie, her dad is a piece of shit, he just wanted to use her to make a profit, and he gets kicked out of the house. Back with Clay, he got the boy! Woo! Brooke is crying about her dad, and Julian comforts her over her terrible parents. This is mirrored by a shot of Nathan going to talk to Dan, and then a scene of them talking at the river court where Dan finally explains why he murdered Keith. He was jealous of him, and it was a saga of poor life choices, which really says a lot about Dan. It's weird to finally hear why he did what he did, and it in no way justifies what he did, but explains a lot. I won't repeat all of what he said because, Jesus Christ, it's a lot. Nathan has come to terms with his dad, he says he loves him, and it's the big moment of closure as Dan and Nathan shoot some hoops for fun at the river court. But it was all a dream and he flatlines. As Nathan rushes to get a doctor, we see him run past Force Ghost Uncle Keith! Holy shit! And Dan sees his big brother again for the first time in a long time. Dan gets up and he walks out with his brother into the high school hallway. Dan apologizes to Keith and he forgives him. After a lengthy speech and a hug, we see them walk off to see the family's reaction to his death. They walk off into the great unknown, and somehow, against all odds, Danny Boy makes it to heaven with his older brother.
Episode 186 out of 187.
Well, it's time to wrap these things up, and it's time for Julian to pitch his TV show version of An Unkindness of Ravens, which Brooke points out is a knockoff version of The Creek, in reference to Dawson and his creek. It's a funny scene of Julian pitching One Tree Hill, and it's a very meta moment. It borders on being really goddamn annoying, though. But Julian pitches the show, and we'll check in on that in a moment. For now, hey, remember that Burning Boat Festival from way back in Season 1? Apparently that's back. Just thought you should know. Also, Bitchtoria is back in town, but she and Brooke are actually bonding? How nice. Jaylee Haim Scott has been asked to do the announcing thing for the festival, following in the footsteps of my dearly beloved Coach Whitey. Anyhows, Mouth has completed his arc and lost the weight he inexplicably gained, and most of the River Court gang is back on the court. We see Skills, Junk, Fergie, and Mouth all together again. Clay sets up a room for Little Guy, and it'll all go well. Julian's pitch meeting went well, and they bought the pitch. And his phone call to Brooke feels way too masturbatory for its own good. Julian's coming home tonight, and they're gonna celebrate the only way they know how. They're so proud of each other, and it's a nice moment. Then it's time for Julian to write a script. Brooke then hands Julian her diary as a source to make his script more real. Chase talks about losing his Air Force to Jaylee Haim Scott and preparing for the festival. Mouth and Millie talk out at the River Court, and it's time for Mouth to return to sportscasting. You know, his true calling of calling sports games. Clay has his son home for the first time ever, and he's scared of the ocean. We get some Brooke memories as Julian reads her diary to understand the untold story of Brooke Davis. Speaking of Brooke goes to visit her mom in a hotel and then discovers her parents were engaging in Funky Town shenanigans. She comes home and visits Julian, who's gonna have a talk with Brooke's parents. Clay and Logan, his little shit son, enter the ocean together as Gwen takes pictures of their baby steps into the ocean. Julian visits his in-laws and has a very strong talk with her dad, and it's a quick little fight. At Trick, Chase is having a stroke and an existential crisis that, for all intents and purposes, scares the hoes. Clay helps his son overcome his fear of being here as the family sleeps in a tent in the living room. Brooke's parents have come to apologize and explain what went wrong, and they bought out the investors so Brooke can keep the new boys line. And all goes pretty well, all things considered. Brooke is broke no more, since she's got her company back. Before the big event, we see Brooke and Jaylee Haim Scott talk about how things are, reminisce over how things were, etc., while our final Ryan Adams song plays in the background. And I can't identify this one. It's Gimme Sunshine. Then, at home, Brooke and Julian talk about the script, and it's gone off the rails with some very self-insert heavy gags and more. Tonight, wouldn't you know it, is Trick's 10th year anniversary. Chase feels home here at Trick, and they're gonna do a special show. Wahoo! Clay has a family now, and Gwen helped the little guy get over his ocean fears, and it's nice. We see Julian having started to set up sets and all that, and everything is going perfectly for them. And now, it's time for Skills to step up to the co-hosting duties. And he nails it! We get a small thing of Chuck and Chase hanging out, and Brooke decides to burn her diary. We get a small thing of Clay and Gwen Quames with Logan, and it's nice to see them finally happy. Now it's time to set the boat on fire one last time, which really means the second time we're seeing it. Anyhow, Jaylee Hames Scott gives a speech and burns it all to the ground, and it's perfect. Every main couple is happy. Chase burns his dismissal letter like a champ. Chase then gets offered to buy Trick so it can be his baby now. Speaking of babies, Clay and Jwin Quames are gonna get married, and they're gonna be one big family. Brooke gives her parents one last chance to be a real family, and they make the most of it, and it's nice. It's the first time, perhaps ever, that they get to be a real family. And with that, everyone, we have one final episode to cover.
I miss you.
Episode 187 out of 187. This is it. The grand finale. The big, final end of the story. And as such, we don't even get the classic intro. I feel robbed. And you know what? Fuck this. I'm gonna play the intro again. This is my show. I'm ending this series with the intro. This is my shit. Roll intro, editor. Thank you.
Dung, dung. I don't want to be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I don't want to be anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. All I have to do is think of me and I have peace of mind. I'm tired of looking around rooms wondering what I gotta do or who I'm supposed to be. I don't wanna be anything other than me.
We open with a wide shot look around town and see a young Nathan bawling down at the river court while an older Nathan starts to ponder the problems of getting older. Brooke does the same thing while watching Julian start to direct the show. Jaylee Hames Scott watches herself write her list of senior year predictions she made with Lucas. Chase wakes up and is jump scared by a bearded Chris Keller. Clay and family are still sleeping in the tent. Mouth and Millie make out while working out. Jamie is shooting hoops in the high school gym and looks up to his dad's jersey with a look in his eyes. The kind of look that says he's gonna beat his record. We see a bit of the 10th year anniversary Trick show, and Jaylee Hames Scott gives a small little speech, and it feels like she's addressing the audience. Anyways, we're back to Chris Keller, and he's gone insane. But who cares about that? Mouth got a check for $500,000 from Dan Scott's estate saying, "What you do matters." Weird. Anyways, we see Brooke visit a recreation of Peyton's bedroom, and it's a fun thing to see. She reminisces over the good old days of seasons 1 through 6, and we're back to Trick. Jaylee Hames Scott has to perform one last time. It's not bad, honestly. Chase and Mouth talk about the night Trick opened, and now Chase owns the bar. His 10th year anniversary shot sucks, and he gets slapped by both Chris and Clay. Speaking of Clay, he's just gotten permission from his son to be his dad, legally, again. Back at Trick, Nathan and Chris Keller get one last scene. Nathan has a thank you gift for Chris, and it's the exact guitar he had to sell to get Haley's master recordings way back in season whatever the hell. It's a fun moment, and they've finally settled their differences. It's time for Chris Keller to go on stage one last time. Shockingly, they didn't have him do When the Stars Go Blue, which would have driven me insane, but it doesn't matter, this is the finale. Brooke and her family celebrate the launch of her new clothing line, and it goes great. Anyhow, Chris puts on one hell of a show, which is high praise given how far he's come. Still not a good person, but he's doing something good. Jamie's at the river court shooting hoops to prepare to beat his old man's record. Nathan gives his son a speech about being a good person, and when Jamie says he likes sports, Nathan hits me with, "That's my boy," which hits hard for me. My man! And you know what? No, I can do a better one for the finale. Madman! That's better. Anyhow, Clay and Dwin go to get the custody papers, and who's working at this law firm other than Bevan? That's right, surprise cameo appearance by Bevan, a character I forgot about. But they'll have to come back in an hour to get custody. Logan calls Dwin Quame's mom, and it's a big moment for them. Behold! Wrapping up everyone's character arc! Anyhow, it's time for the Mouth segment, and Dan thanks Mouth for what he did, which Skills accurately points out was the right thing. He's a real hero. Chris and Chase engage in a bit of chicanery, but we don't care. At Karen's Cafe, Brooke and Jaylee Hames Scott bring the books back to the cafe. Brooke is opening a clothing store across the street from Karen's Cafe, too. Who cares? We're headed back to Trick. Chris Keller and Jaylee Hames Scott talk, and she signs Chris Keller to the label. He's grown a lot as a person, but he's still the guy he used to be, just a bit better. Who cares, though? It's time for a very special guest. That's right, the first ever guest appearance in the show. It's actual musician Gavin DeGraw. And no, he's not doing the song. He did other songs, I guess. As he plays the first song of the night, we get a romantic scene between Jaylee Hames and Nathan in a recreation of the classic bracelet scene from season 1, but with like a real actual bracelet. Checking back on Clay and Dwin waiting to get custody, they get married without the ceremony. The Evans family is now a full family. Yippee! We get a scene of Brooke and Julian on the set for the show, and they leave together. We see Mouth give a sports show about Keith and Jimmy, and it's the perfect way to close out his character. He gives a good speech about setting up a sports-based scholarship fund in their name for every aspect of sports. Back at Trick, it's Gavin's second song of the night. And 95.1 WDNC, we do not care. Memory time. It's pouring rain, and it's the perfect weather for a Nathan and Jaylee moment, dancing and kissing in the rain, as they always have since the start. God damn, man, they loved this. Anyhow, Julian's got one big surprise for Brooke. He bought her old house back, and they're gonna live there. I guess you could say Brooke successfully wished for impossible things, and gets to live happily ever after. What a show, man. What a show. Anyways, the Evans family puts their son to bed. Jaylee Hames Scott shows Jamie the prediction she and Lucas made, and she passes it on to Jamie. He's determined to break his dad's scoring record, and you know he's wishing for impossible things, and that's okay. Or something. And then she'll ruin the moment by saying the line, quote, "There's only one Tree Hill, Jamie Scott. Kill me now." Back on set, we see Brooke get nostalgia for Peyton's locker, and Julian asks her what made high school so special. It's a place of firsts, she claims, and I suppose I remember it for the same reasons. It's where these essays started, goddammit. Anyways, sentimental bullshit aside, a certain song starts playing, and I guess they didn't forget to play this song after all, because it's time to play it loud and in its entirety. I don't wanna be. We got the intro song after all, baby! Woo! We see the entire cast in Trick singing the song along with him, and man, it just hits hard now. My journey through the 2000s shit show is coming to a close with a montage around Karen's Cafe. I just can't help but feel like someone's missing from this montage, though. Actually, quite a few people, but most importantly, Lubisky and Peyton. Anyhow, we've got the whole core cast here from the last few seasons. We get a specific shot of Jaylee Hames Scott reading Julius Caesar, just like Lubisky in the first episode. We get more concert shots and a pan out from Karen's Cafe as the song ends. We got a time jump, and it seems to be that the kids are all Tree Hill Ravens, and it's time for basketball. Mouth and Millie are married and having kids, which is cool, and now it's time to ball as a U2 song plays. Guess what song it is? Take a wild stab as to what it is. Hint, it's One Tree Hill. No, I'm not messing with you. The song is genuinely called One Tree Hill. It's one of the songs off of Joshua Tree. Just, because I know this sort of thing. Anyways, we see Jamie has beaten Nathan's record, and he couldn't be more proud of his son. Everyone gets a last-minute narration moment meant to leave the audience with one last message from each character. And as the basketball boys take the court, the show ends on a freeze frame of all our protagonists, and we fade to credits. With that, everyone, this journey through One Tree Hill is finally over. I did it. I watched every goddamn episode of this dumpster fire, and it only took me 136 pages to recap all of it. Oh, it's over. I can't fucking believe it's over. We did it. All 187 episodes recapped. Whoa! It's fucking over, baby! Yes! Yeah, baby! Oh, let's fucking go! Oh, that's the culmination of so much work. We did it! It's over! Let's fucking go! Yeah! Okay, I gotta hold it together. Please keep in mind that this isn't actually the end. We have, in fact, one more episode to go. So please join me, because we've got a big boy to cover. We've got to get to all of the analysis. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this, just all 9 season recaps. I hope you're ready for the part that I really wanted to get to, because we've got some stuff to talk about. Believe me, after fucking 9 hours of content recapping all of the show, we've got stuff to talk about still. Don't you know? The end is almost in sight, but hey, whatever. Enjoy the ride. I'm so happy. We're so fucking close.